How many discounts does USAA Auto Insurance offer? Too many to say here. Multi-vehicle discount, safe driver discount, new vehicle discount, storage discount, legacy.
How many discounts will you stack up? Visit USAA.com/auto discounts. Restrictions apply.
With a major selection of the looks your kiddos love starting at just $4 in the Walmart app, a new school year means a stylish new them. Who knew? Find skater skirts and Crocs that say, I'm casual but cool. Sparkly sneakers that say, it's my classroom, you're just learning in it. And preppy polos that say, I'm the teacher's pet, even if they're mommy's menace at home. Find their favorite styles starting at just $4 in the app. The Walmart you thought you knew is now new.
Hey, where is Adam?
I'm not sure. I thought he was with you.
Oh, that's right. You know what? He's away. He recorded with us and jetted before we could do the opening. So, what's nice about this week is we're doing something a little different.
I mean, he was scammed, but he is also an author. And his book is about a scam, so it kind of fits.
Am I supposed to guess who's he?
None other than Cory Doctorow.
Oh, actually, that's pretty awesome. All right, with no further ado, welcome to What the Hack without Adam Levin. I'm Beau Friedlander.
And I'm Travis Taylor.
Cory Doctorow, welcome to our show.
Hi, it's a pleasure to be on the show.
So, where are you coming to us from?
I'm in Burbank, California, a little town on the outskirts of LA, 100,000 people.
So now, you describe yourself as a science fiction author, activist, and journalist.
It's a long story, but basically I write novels. I have been involved with a digital human rights group called the Electronic Frontier Foundation for now 22 years, working on a lot of different campaigns related to speech and privacy and competition and all kinds of things. And I am a journalist and a blogger. I am one of the owners of a website called Boing Boing that I helped write for about 19 years these days. I have my own site called pluralistic.net, but also I've written for most of the major dailies and magazines and everything in between.
Now, you've written a ton of books. Some of them could be titles for episodes of What the Hack, like Pirate Cinema or Attack Service or Red Team Blues. Those are novels. Among your nonfiction titles, there's Information Doesn't Want to Be Free, Laws for the Internet Age, and How to Destroy Surveillance Capitalism. You're really singing our tune.
Sure, yeah. And I should say, I write when I'm anxious. So during lockdown, I produced 9 books. Currently touring one of the 4 novels, and I've just got Help Me signed up to write a 10th one. So life comes at you fast. I started working with the Electronic Frontier Foundation in 2002, I'm going to say. And at the time, I was mostly working on exposing the workings of cartels that wanted to limit how computers could work. So particularly the motion picture studios and the television broadcasters had cooked up this idea called the broadcast flag that was nominally like an anti-piracy standard for digital television, but was actually a way to give the FCC jurisdiction over the design of every digital computer. The FCC eventually did, in fact, adopt this rule. Colin Powell's son, Michael Powell, was then chairman, adopted this rule despite our best efforts. But then we sued them in the federal circuit, and we won, establishing that the FCC's jurisdiction didn't extend that far.
So you have been really involved in Creative Commons, and you have, let's just say, not mainstream ideas about copyright, but really interesting ones and ones that are in line with the way the internet works.
I got religion on this during the Napster era. So, when Napster kicked off, 80% of the music ever recorded wasn't available for sale at any price. The big 3 labels had hit on a strategy of just drawing down availability to our culture in order to maximize sales of new product. They didn't give artists a very good deal, and certainly fans weren't getting a very good deal. The price was very high. Napster created this moment where basically everything ever recorded suddenly became available. Now, of course, no one was getting paid for it, but Napster's investors authorized them to write a check with as many zeros as it took to the labels, and the labels said no. At the time, I didn't think the labels had artists' best interests at heart, although they said they were doing it for the artists. I thought that it was possible to want to see artists paid without thinking that labels were the people who were going to make that happen. As a person who makes his living from books, I have to be an expert in copyright and pay attention to it, but that the real issue for the things that I care about in terms of creators and their rights is a labor issue and not a copyright issue at all.
I want to go back to how you referred to the music and movie industries as being cartels. Because usually when you hear the word cartel, you think of like a drug organization or something. What's the overlap between the legal and the illegal cartels?
Well, cartel originally applied to legal businesses that formed arrangements. Those arrangements were sometimes called trusts, hence antitrust. Under the letter of competition law as it stands in the United States today, the kind of collusive behavior, right, where companies get together and agree on common business strategies, even though they're nominally competitors, the kind of collusive behavior that we routinely see from our very concentrated industries, which are across the board. It's not just entertainment. So every sector is like so inbred, it's got a Habsburg jaw. And for 40 years, we've just allowed firms to engage in conduct that was formally unlawful. Two companies that do all of the mobile app stuff, right? Apple and Google. And they both charge exactly the same commission to app creators. Generally, in a competitive market, prices are different, right? People differentiate themselves with prices. One of the reasons we don't like markets with two firms in them is because collusion emerges naturally as well as explicitly out of those firms. There's another duopoly that Google is part of, which is the ad tech duopoly of Facebook and Google, or Meta and Google.
Cory, speaking of trust, you recently had an incident with your credit union that if we were to write a short story about it, we'd probably entitle it Trust.
Yeah, I like that segue, by the way. It was very smooth. Over Christmas break, my wife and I went to New Orleans. And first thing we did when we hit the French Quarter was tried to get some cash out of a Chase ATM. And it just threw an error message. And so then we were walking around town and we saw a credit union. We bank with a little one-branch credit union here in Burbank. So that's great because the credit unions all have fee-sharing arrangements. So you don't pay a fee if you use another credit union's ATM. So I drew out some money. A couple of days go by. We're getting ready to go. And my phone rings and it's my bank's number on my caller ID. And the guy says, Mr. Doctorow. And I say, yes. And he says, I'm calling from your bank. Did you just try and buy an iPhone in New York for $1,000? I said, oh, no, I didn't. I guess my card has been cloned. And I immediately knew what it was, right? It was either that Chase ATM, which threw that error because there was a skimmer on it that was causing it to malfunction, or was that really cheap Chinese ATM that the credit union that we went to had. But one or the other definitely got my card skimmed. So we're going through this whole process with this guy, and it just goes on and on and on and on. And it's like the last couple hours in New Orleans, my family back at the hotel, I've gone out to get my favorite sandwich, this big sandwich called a muffaletta, and I'm like sitting there across the street from the muffaletta place going like, how long am I going to be on the phone with this guy? Finally, like, dude, I'm going to call you back when I get through airport security. I'm going to go get a sandwich, pick up my family. We're going to go to the airport. I'll call back the after hours number. And he's like really pissy about it. But I'm like, you've already frozen my card. We can go through the details later. So I go and get my sandwich. I go home, go to the airport. And that was the day that a 737 MAX had its door plug fall out while it was in the sky. So the airport was a nightmare because every 737 MAX in this country had just been grounded. Everyone's rebooking. So we were just in line forever, barely made the gate. I had like 3 minutes. I tried calling them up and the after hours number said, no, this is the lost card number. It sounds like you're okay because it's a fraud issue and you already spoke to the fraud department. So I just got on the plane, went home. Monday morning, I printed out all the recent transactions, lined out the ones that were fraudulent, went to the bank to get a new card. And, I'm going through the process with them. And the woman I'm dealing with, who's a vice president, because it's a little one-branch credit union. And so when you have a fraud, it's the vice president who comes out. She's really upset about this $8,000 worth of fraud that had been done on Sunday. And I said, this is really your after-hours anti-fraud company's problem. Because I told them on Saturday when they called me, I told them to freeze the card. So she calls the anti-fraud. She comes back and she says, they never called you. You were speaking to the fraudster. I start to think about this call and I'm like, wait a second. I didn't give him any information, right? He got my date of birth, but that's in my Wikipedia entry. He got my town, but that's in my Wikipedia entry. What did he get? I gave him the last 4 of my card. That's nothing. And then I thought, oh, he asked for the last 7 of my card.
Oh my God. And then you set your hair on fire and ran down the hallway, slapping yourself in the face.
100%, because if you're a little one branch credit union, the first 9 digits are the same for every card.
I assume this was probably a mixture of a skimmer that got a camera and a code, or it also recorded the code.
I didn't get skimmed. I filled that part in myself.
Oh.
This is Swiss cheese security. You've heard of Swiss cheese security, right? You've got multiple layers of Swiss cheese. They've all got different holes. When the Swiss cheese is lined up, the holes are backstopped by the cheese between them, but all the pieces are moving, and every now and again there's a hole all the way through. If this guy called not on a day when I'd used a janky ATM in the French Quarter, I would have told him to f*** off. If he hadn't called when I had to get my big sandwich, I would have told him to f*** off. If he hadn't known my phone number, so this is the thing where it starts to get weird. He knew my phone number in my bank, and I spoke to the risk management officer at my bank, and she said, credit unions across America are getting hit by this. The fraudsters know your name, they know where you bank, and they have your phone number. My phone number is not a matter of public record. I'm pretty careful about my phone number. So this was a leak. It's a breach somewhere in the credit union system supply chain. They share a lot of services, all these little credit unions. They have like Swift corresponding on institutions. They all use Zelle, like all different ways where they could have gotten caught. This guy, he had the convincing piece of information. I got to the airport, and if I'd had an hour, as we were supposed to have, instead of 5 minutes, I would have called the other after hours number and spoken to the fraud center. If the credit union's push button phone navigation menu had used slightly different syntax for which service you were speaking to when you call them up to speak to someone after hours, I would have gone through to the fraud first. And this guy was taking a million shots, and he just got lucky that one day and got me.
So this was the muffaletta at the airport. It was
the muffaletta, it was the airport, it was the Supermax, it was the French Quarter, right? It was all this stuff that happened all at the same moment. And it was vacation brain, because I was on vacation. If I hadn't understood skimmers, if I hadn't seen a million photos of amazing skimmers, if I hadn't known about all the countermeasures banks have put into skimmers to freeze ATMs up if they encounter a skimmer.
You would have said 4 digits, buddy. 4 digits. Yeah. That's all you get.
It was because I was knowledgeable that I was vulnerable. Right, it's a bit of it's somewhere between like Dunning-Kruger and the curse of knowledge here, you know.
So we were talking about cartels before we got into your scam, and the way you talked about them reminded me of a line from your most recent book, The Bezzle, which you're out promoting right now. It's published by Tor Books, and if you want to get it, you can get it anywhere books are sold.
And it's a national bestseller as of this week. I have 2 national bestsellers on the USA Today list right now, and it's my 3rd in 12 months.
Fantastic.
Mazel tov.
I'm indecently proud.
You should be indecently proud. Now, one of the things that, jumped out at me was, some of your descriptions are wonderful, like the subprimiest loan was great, but you described a million-armed robot whose every limb was tipped with a needle that sank itself into a different place on prisoners and their families and drew out a few more cc's of blood. And when you get into the book, you'll understand exactly what we're talking about. It's a white-collar scam that's happening here. We're going to get into that after the break. We're really looking forward to it.
This episode is sponsored by Friskies, who would like to tell your cats hi. Now, if that didn't get your cat's attention, there's one thing that always does the trick. Just pour some Friskies crunchy food in the bowl and you'll hear those paws come running. Works every time. With so many Friskies choices, you can always bring your cats running from their secret napping spots. There's always more to explore. See for yourself at friskies.com or visit your local store.
This episode is brought to you by Nespresso Virtuo Coffee Machines. Ready to enjoy the bold flavors of barista-quality Nespresso iced coffee at home? Simply fill a glass with ice and press the brew button on your Virtuo Pop machine to enjoy rich double espressos roasted to stand up even when chilled. Refreshingly bold iced coffee. Refreshingly easy to make at home. Visit Nespresso.com to shop now.
So, Cory, you're out promoting a new book, The Bezzle, which is on the bestseller list, and I congratulate you for that. And I read it, and I loved it. And I'm just interested why you chose Martin Hench, the forensic accountant, as the star of your book.
Well, one of the things I've spent the last couple of decades doing is trying to explain technically complex scams to people, where those scams they've been made complicated, so they will be hard to understand. And a lot of the work that myself and my colleagues do is trying to get people who are not yet cognizant of how much harm they're actually experiencing to kind of understand the details of the scam before that harm is felt and manifest. Bezzle, the Bezzle, it's a term from John Kenneth Galbraith that describes the magic interval after the con artist has your money, but before you know it's a con, when both of you feel good. And getting people to understand that they've been conned, right? That the Bitcoin is worthless, subprime loans are nonsense, that AI is a bubble,
Bernie Madoff was a fraud.
that the way Facebook is handling your private information is someday going to bring you to absolute misery and ruin, because once you collect it, you can't uncollect it. That getting people to understand this early on is really important. And a forensic accountant is a really good vehicle for unpicking these tight knots. You know, everyone's trying to find their way to do this because we live in this golden age of the scam. So you have Adam Conover from Adam Ruins Everything coming up with these great sketches. You have John Oliver and his team doing all kinds of fun things once a week. You have Margot Robbie in a bathtub explaining collateralized debt obligations. I mean, and my thinking was a kind of propulsive, hard-charging thriller plot built around the minutiae of these scams would serve me well. It's something I've done before, not with scams, but with other kinds of technical information. You know, my best-selling series before this is a young adult series called Little Brother. And Little Brother started off, its kind of impetus was my hearty disgust with techno thrillers that just got the technology really wrong. And not because I'm pedantic, but because I was like, God, there's so many opportunities to tell really exciting stories based on how the technology actually works and what its actual constraints are. And so I found these stories kind of latent in how encryption works and privacy tools and hacking and so on, and made stories where, as you read them, even if you didn't understand that stuff, there was a kind of salience to them, because I think even a reader who wasn't very technically skilled could understand that this was all stuff that was real. It wasn't made up. And as a result, even though the story adventure was made up, the MacGuffins weren't, and so paying attention to them would reward that attention.
The protagonist in The Bezzle starts off thinking that the ratio of legitimate businesses to scams is 80-20, and then said after doing a little bit of digging, he sees it close to 40-60. Just wondering if you can explain how that works and if that's also your shared opinion.
It's 20-80, come on.
28, I guess it depends on how you measure it. You know, like I needed a locksmith today, and this is one of the great crises of the 21st century, because locksmiths are the sector that first perfected these referral scams on Google Maps and on Google. I knew there was a locksmith not far from me. It'd been in business since 1942, Golden State Lock and Safe. And when you search Google for this, they don't show up. What shows up are 100 ghost locksmiths who don't even exist. Right? It's just a referral scam that where if you call any of those phone numbers, they will answer it, you know, Burbank locksmith, and you say, I need a locksmith, and they will dispatch some half-trained guy with a drill and a shitty lock, and they'll charge you $400 to drill out your lock and replace it with this shitty one. And then they'll make you 3 sets of keys that don't work and charge you $10 a key. And, you know, if you want to count the ratio of legitimate to illegitimate locksmiths in my neighborhood based on Google, that ratio cannot be calculated because 0 legitimate locksmiths come up in the search, right? So any number divided by 0 is infinity. So we have an infinite number of scams in my neighborhood, depending on how you want to measure it. Multiply that by electricians, plumbers, carpenters, house cleaning services, mobile car washes, you know, you name it, Google's got it. And Google, you may have noticed the DOJ suing them for their monopolistic practices. Google spends $26 billion a year to make sure that you never try another search engine. They buy and torch a whole Twitter every 18 months or so to make sure that the default search engine everywhere you go is Google, which means no one funds rivals to Google, because why would you if there's nowhere where a person might encounter it? And they took $80 billion out of their operating capital last year and used it for a stock buyback, because apparently they don't need to spend any more money to improve their services. It's as good as it needs to be.
So, Cory, you're describing Death Star behavior here, but we're talking about your book. Also, some Death Star behavior in there. So we start with this Catalina, we're on the Catalina Islands thinking about bison, and there's this weird burger, maybe pyramid scheme, maybe some other kind of scheme, but a scam. And what was your goal in telling that story? Because we go from there to a kind of mind-blowing, kind of sinister corporate roll-up.
Yeah. So I think that when you look at the broader economy, so much of it is taken up with scams. All of Congress is insider trading. If you just follow congressional trades, you can become a very rich person. So from the top down, we look at this and it's just scam after scam after scam. Private equity companies buy the hospital and stop paying the repair staff, and sludge starts coming out of the walls. And you look at this, you're like, these guys are billionaires and this is how they behave. So when you encounter another scam in the wild, an obvious scam, your high school chum calls you up to try and sell you a pair of leggings or some essential oils. And then it turns out that what they really want to do is sell you the right to sell essential oils. You go, well, this is a scam, but that doesn't disqualify it from being real.
And that's a good point. I mean, scams are real and legitimate things can be scams.
Yeah, or better, everything's a scam.
Right.
Real is not the opposite of scam. Scam is, in fact, much more prevalent than legitimate productive activity. And so by taking this micro scale scam, the thing to understand about Catalina Island is it was once the private preserve of William Wrigley Jr., the chewing gum monopolist, who bought this island and ran it like the HOA from hell, but with just one person in charge. He banned fast food, which, fine, I don't like fast food, but people on the island kind of have a kind of a forbidden fruit fetish for fast food. If you go to the little K-12 school and you go for an away game for your football team, everyone expects you to bring back a sack of In-N-Out or McDonald's because it's a rarity on the island. It's a treat. And so this turns into, in my novel, a Ponzi scheme. And the point of Ponzi schemes is never the thing, right? It's never the tights. It's not the hamburgers. It's the derivatives. It's the leverage. And that's why when Ponzi schemes blow up, they take down whole economies with them. And so by starting with this micro scale Ponzi, where you can see the incentives, and then pulling back to the 2008 financial crisis and real estate investment trusts and over-leveraged collateralized debt obligations, and then showing how that creates the capital flows that allow even bigger scams, which in this book is the private prison sector, and particularly the prison tech sector, which are people who lobby to have prisons remove their visitors' rooms, their telephones, their library, mail delivery, parcel delivery, and replace them all with a quote-unquote free tablet where you pay $8 a minute for a postage stamp-sized video call with your family, or $3 a minute for a crackly phone call, or you pay 3 times as much as you or I would to get a song from a kind of shitty iTunes. And then to make things worse, the greeting card that your kids sent you that they had to pay $5 to have scanned so that you could see it because it goes to a scanning center where it's scanned and shredded. You lose that when they change vendors and they wipe out all of that storage.
What a ripoff.
And you're paying for it by working for 25 cents an hour in the prison workshop. It's brutal, and I am very keenly attuned to something I call the shitty technology adoption curve from 20 years of doing this. Whenever you see something really ghastly being done to people with technology, people who are poor, people who have no agency, what you're looking at is your own future. That the way that we normalize the worst technology in the world is by sanding it smooth on the bodies of people who don't get to complain, and then working your way up the privilege gradient, right? The ankle cuff that starts on a prisoner, makes its way to a mental patient, and then to a truant kid, then it's on an Amazon driver, your boss knowing everywhere you go because there's a tracking tool in the mobile phone that you use for work. William Gibson says the future is here, it's just not evenly distributed. The worst part of the future is concentrated among the least among us, but it's coming for the rest of us.
So it sounds like a lot of what you write about are things that you can't really get out of your head. But I guess the question is, and the thing that would probably delineate this from true crime is that it's fiction. So how much of this are you actually just making up and how much of it is true?
So I think we have to distinguish the process from the method here. So the method is something I call the Memex method. There's this famous essay called As We May See by the cyberneticist Vannevar Bush in, I think, 1946 in The Atlantic, describing this early hypertext system. He's got this idea that you'll take every article and book that you read and put it in this system and it will find the connections and remind you of it. It's just a blog, right? For more than 20 years, every time something that seemed important crossed my path, instead of making a cryptic note to myself in a notebook that I would promptly lose, and even if I could find, I couldn't read my own handwriting, I've written that up for public consumption. And that is like a powerfully mnemonic exercise. When you have to explain what's important, you remember it because you have to think about it. And then you also like get a database, right? So like the WordPress backend is like a database and you can query it. And then I also do this thing every morning where I go through 20-year-old, 15-year-old, 10-year-old, 5-year-old, and 1-year-old blog posts. And I take the headlines that seem important and put them in my newsletter for that day. And so this is like if you're working dough, there's that stuff at the edge that gets sort of dried out and crumbly. You fold it back into the middle. I'm taking this stuff that's fallen out of my attention and putting it right back in the kind of focus of my attention. And so what that means is that every now and again, like these fragments just crystallize into a story or a novel or an idea. So all of this stuff just sort of came together. I didn't really research this novel. I researched, and then this was the novel that came out of the research. I didn't know I was researching this novel. But then there's like this method, right? The science fictional method, because I'm a science fiction writer, even though this is more like a crime thriller. And my editor, Patrick Nielsen Hayden, who's edited every one of my novels, including this one, on my first novel, the feedback that he gave me is that in science fiction, you have the character and you have the world. And the character is like a little gear, and the world is like a big gear. And the job of the character is to go through these perambulations, slowly rotating that big gear, right? Until the big gear does a full rotation, you see the whole world. So the character's life shows you the social speculation. And one of the ways that a science fiction novel can fail is when the little gear and the big gear are not microcosm and macrocosm of one another, when the teeth don't match. And so that method is one that I often use, where I will have a character who sits in microcosm to the broader point that I'm trying to make in macrocosm, and I'll try to make correspondences so that as the character goes through their adventure, which is a fairly verse chorus adventure where you have a person who tries to solve a problem and they fail and the stakes get higher, which is a new problem, and they fail and the stakes get higher and so on until the stakes can't get any higher. And that's the climax. And then you have like a denouement. Like that's the plot outline of like, 90% of all Western narrative, right? So you have this very straightforward plot outline or plot structure, but the particulars are oriented around this microcosm, macrocosm relationship.
Your goal here in writing this book is to help explicate the unwritten essay of late civilization? Is it to talk about the way that we do business, which is a way that we do crime? Is it a torch song for prisoners who are being mistreated and used for greedy ends? Or is it all those things?
At the risk of being pretentious, the first thing that this is a novel. I'm a novelist. I'm making art. And the point of art, foundationally, is to take a numinous and irreducible complex feeling from one person's head and attempt to put it in someone else's head through means of some intermediary medium, like a novel or a song or a sculpture or dance. So that's the first purpose, right? Is to take this thing that I feel when I think about this stuff, which is this big, complicated emotion that kind of haunts me, that drives me, that has me out of bed at 4:30 in the morning to write angry things and research and talk about it and think about how to change it and fly around the world and work on it, to take that feeling and stick it in your head somehow, if I can. It's very easy to put off what may feel intellectually like something you should pay attention to because emotionally it doesn't feel urgent. If you deny the climate emergency long enough, you will eventually care about it because your house will be on fire. Just like if you deny the smoking cancer link, you will eventually stop denying it when you have stage 4 lung cancer. But the problem is that denial turns into nihilism, right? Like we all know the person who has stage 4 lung cancer who says, well, it's too late to quit smoking now. Might as well enjoy them, right? If for 20 years we ignore that person who's saying rhino populations are crashing, we need to do something about it. We'll all agree that the issue is urgent when there's only one left, but someone's going to say, might as well find out what he tastes like. Because when there's only one left, they're not going to survive. And so the point of no return is often after the point of peak indifference. One of the things that storytelling does is it can move the point of no return further up the curve from the point of peak indifference, which means that we can do something about it before it's too late.
It kind of sounds like you're breaking things down and then reconstructing them to kind of make them make a little bit more sense.
Trying to make complicated things legible is an iterative process. You try a metaphor, you try a story, you try an analogy, and you see how it lands and who it doesn't land with. And then you also see what your critics say about it, the people who you're adverse to, and how they try to diffuse what you're saying to make it, to neutralize it so that people aren't up in arms. And you do it again, and you do it again, and you do it again. And one of the things that writing the web gets you, that performance or op-ed doesn't get you in the same way, is a God's eye view of how this stuff lands. The people who are excited by it and the people who are disgusted by it. When I had an office in London for EFF, because I was EFF's European director and that's where I was stationed, I perched in a desk that the Annenberg Center owned across from Marble Arch. Marble Arch was where the Tyburn Gallows were, where they would have executions on Sundays. And as a result, Marble Arch is now where Speaker's Corner is, because people would gather to hear the last words of the condemned on Sundays. If you go to Speaker's Corner on a Sunday, there's people up on stepladders and stools and even on 10-foot tall ladders with megaphones shouting about everything. White nationalists, radical Islamists, Marxists. There was a guy who called himself a Christian atheist, to follow Jesus, reject God, who would preach on the corner. Yeah. And I would get people a little tipsy. I'd bring people over one Sunday a month, and we'd have a champagne brunch with fake Spanish champagne. We'd get a little tipsy, and I had a stepladder and a banner that said London Copy Fighters Drunken Brunch and Talking Shop. And we would go across the street, we'd step on the stepladder before camera phones, and we would give impromptu talks. And it was amazing speakers training because they have hereditary clans of hecklers. There was like a grandfather, father, and son who used to come and heckle us, who'd been doing it for generations. And that's a pretty good live fire exercise that gets you a lot of feedback. But writing the web, it's not just those three guys. You see how it lands with everyone. And you're privy to how much, whatever they want to disclose about what they think. And so the explanations get better and better and better. And the persuasiveness goes up and up because you're sharpening your horns on someone else.
It's back to school season, and Clorox is donating 2 million disinfecting wipes to classrooms across America. Because back to school means things can get a little bit messy. Just ask kindergarten teacher Miss Gibson.
Give me just one Clorox wipe and I'm ready for glitter glue, exploded lunchbox yogurt, peanut butter handprints, runny noses, picking noses, rubbing noses.
Touching noses.
Thank you, Edward. Ooh, nap mats and lockers and tissue boxes. And
Clorox
scissors.
disinfecting wipes. Teacher's #1 wipe. Clean feels good. Based on unit sales data.
You've talked before about how the real world influences your writing in terms of the story, but how does your activism influence your work?
I will not allow what's called digital rights management to be put on my books, which is where they're encrypted and you can only read them using the readers that are provided by the vendor who sold them to you. Amazon's okay. It will let you sell ebooks without DRM on their Kindle program, but they also own Audible, which is 90% of the audiobook market. And they won't make audiobooks available without DRM. And so I won't sell on Audible, and Audible is 90% of that market. So as a result, I have to make my own audiobooks And then I sell them everywhere that's not Amazon, which is not anywhere anyone shops, but I pre-sell them on Kickstarter when they come out. And I've done this for like 5-6 books in a row and had a string of 6-figure Kickstarters. They do spectacularly well. Nobody wants DRM.
The way that you described Amazon just now brings us right back to that quote, a million-armed robot whose every limb was tipped with a needle that sank itself into a different place, into the into every customer in the United States. And it's cool that you're doing some work on that front as an activist, as an author.
So for your next book, are there any scams or topics you're thinking about including? For instance, are we going to see maybe something about a distracted protagonist in New Orleans waiting to get a muffaletta when a scammer calls?
So the next one is much more about MLMs and about the psychology of MLMs, and particularly affinity group MLMs.
Just to confirm, MLM is multi-level marketing, like pyramid schemes, right?
Right, like the way that MLMs are about abusing the trust of people who rely on one another for survival. Faith group MLMs tend to prey on people who are poor and who have close social networks as a result, because when you're poor, you substitute social capital for money, right? You can't afford a babysitter, so you have someone you trust who looks after your kids when you pull an extra shift, right? It is particularly corrosive, that kind of MLM, because it takes the only thing you have, right? It's one thing to lose all your money, but to lose all your money and all your friends leaves you truly devastated.
My parents did that in the 70s. They were Amway people, and Amway was one of the big MLMs back in the day.
Amway is a really good example here because it's the MLM. So an MLM, multi-level marketing, is when you are nominally selling a product, right? Tights, soap, dishes, spices, essential oils. But what you're really doing is you're selling the right to sell soap or dishes or whatever to someone else, who is then going to sell it to someone else, who's then going to sell it to someone else. And each of those people owes you a certain minimum every month. So, this is pyramid selling. And I think most of us have probably encountered it. It is very big in faith groups. MLMs are particularly big among Mormons. The reason I say Amway is the granddaddy of them all, is that Amway was a gigantic MLM in America, and it was founded by Betsy DeVos's father-in-law, who was also the head of the Chamber of Commerce, and whose congressman, when the FTC came after him, was a guy who was relatively prominent named Gerald Ford, who then became the president and instructed his FTC to redefine what pyramid selling was to not include the characteristics of Amway. So provided you structured your MLM like Amway, it was legal. And every MLM since is basically Amway with some of the details shuffled around because of the Amway rule. Every book that I come up with an epitaph to sign in the book. And the epitaph I've been signing for this is "Behind every great fortune is a great crime," Honoré de Balzac. And the DeVoses epitomize this. This is you take a criminal enterprise, wait 40 years, and you're the great and the good.
Well, to be fair, the Kennedys are also kind of posters.
They certainly are.
Adam is the only person I know who's done well in business, and I've been there for a long time. There's no bodies. No bodies. None.
Well, we vaporize them. It's much different.
Right.
That's why, because we put them in barrels with acid.
You're running a dodgy crematorium then.
Cory, I can't thank you enough for spending some time with us today and sharing not only your scam, but your wonderful book. And I've read it. I highly recommend it. I think we all very much enjoyed the book.
It's called the Bezzle. It is published by Tor, and it's available wherever you get your books. And it has none of those strictures that you might find on your e-reader.
Do you have a preferred bookseller?
If you want a signed copy of Romans, a book soup, They take orders for signed copies, and I drop in every couple of weeks when I'm in town and sign them. So they'll take a signed copy order if you want to get one inscribed for someone for their birthday or Mother's Day or Father's Day. That's nice, but wherever you buy them is fine.
Thanks again, Cory.
I've really enjoyed this too. It's lovely to chat with you.
Okay, it's time for a tinfoil swan.
Our paranoid takeaway to keep you safe on and offline.
Okay. The answer for me is no. But do either of you have a video doorbell?
I do.
The answer for me is hell no for a lot of reasons. Mostly privacy.
I saw that coming from a mile away.
I understand there's a new study from Consumer Reports that found that some are a lot worse than others, maybe?
What? Like, so when did you stop beating your wife? When did you stop cooking your wife? When did you stop selling what you made when you cooked your wife to other people?
This took a dark turn. Well, I read the same study, and what it said is that there are a lot of these video doorbells that you can get on, Amazon, Walmart.com, what have you, for like $30 instead of $100. And they're sort of a privacy and security nightmare.
All right, so what are we talking about here? IP address or Wi-Fi over the internet without encryption?
Yes, and that's just for starters. For a lot of these, if you just have the device's serial number, you can access the video feed. You can take over someone's doorbell with a QR code.
And by doorbell, you mean the camera in the doorbell, right?
Right.
Well, is this just like, Poland Spring Water, which by another name is Bob's Water? Are they all made by the same company?
Pretty much, yeah. It's a company called Eakin, but they're sold under a variety of different brand names, so you don't really know what you're going to get.
So what should people do? Not have video doorbells? Should I just tear mine out of my wall?
No, I've been using it with great delight.
In my personal opinion, yes, you should. That's not really realistic.
OMG. Adam, Travis just admitted that he wasn't being realistic. Finally. Okay. Companies like Ring, Nest, probably more secure, right?
They're for sure better vetted. Ring is owned by Amazon, Nest by Google. These both have their own privacy problems, but neither is fly-by-night.
Yeah, well, you know what? I think they're pretty damn cavalier with information. So if you're thinking about going with a Ring or Nest, realize that your information is for sure being sold. And once it's out there forever, as our guest said today.
And with any internet-connected device in your home, just consider the risks.
That's our tinfoil swan.
What the Hack with Adam Levin is a production of Loud Tree Media. You can find us online at adamlevin.com and on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook at Adam K. Levin.
Loud Tree.
Behind every great meal is a person with a story to tell. Hear them on Culinary Characters Unlocked, the podcast that reveals the lives behind the food. Hosted by me, David Page, Emmy Award-winning journalist and creator of Diners, Drive-Ins, and Dives, as I talk with everyone from culinary legends to mom-and-pop standouts about the creativity, grit, and passion that shape the food we love. Follow Culinary Characters Unlocked on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts.
Behind every empire are the people history tried to forget. Lost Roman Heroes tells the stories of the remarkable characters who shaped Rome from its mythical beginnings to its final fall.
Each episode blends armchair storytelling, sharp historical insight, and a bit of humor to bring these lost figures to life. From generals to scientists, from rebels to empresses, from priests to politicians, these lost Roman heroes have one thing in common.
They stood up for civilization when the bad guys threatened, and in doing so, they changed the course of human history. If you're into history that's vivid, surprising, and deeply human, this show's for you.